Thank you, Thea. Thank you to the SACS conference for inviting us, and thank you for the audience here. We're going to start with a quick round of introduction. I'm going to maybe start at the end of the table. Roman, you want to take the floor, 1 or 2 minutes each, just to set the scene, and then maybe we're going to leave the floor to James for a quick recap of what 2025 looked like and 2026. Rotem, please.
Thank you. Rotem Kopel, CEO of Ability Neurotech. We are one of the new BCI company, brain-computer interface companies, invasive brain-computer interface. It's a new company that actually developed a technology, spun out a technology from a V-Center in Geneva. We're based in Europe. And what we do, we actually do an end-to-end brain-computer interface, meaning electrodes, implants, decoder, and application. And we are based on a technology that is quite advanced. It was developed for the last 8 years in a research center in Geneva. And when we spun it out, we had to go through the last process of validating it before going into human. And 26 is going to be for us all about clinical work. We're going to do chronic and not chronic recording for that technology, and a lot of regulation steps towards getting ourselves familiar with FDA and European regulation capabilities. Thank you very much.
Ken Mariash, CEO of Sinaptica Therapeutics. Sinaptica has developed a personalized form of TMS stimulation. We combine TMS with EEG together in real time to confirm that we're hitting the right circuits in the brain. In our case, the target is the default mode network. That is the brain's key memory network, which is most affected in Alzheimer's. We've completed 2 randomized phase 2 trials, one at 6 months, one at 12 months, where we met the primary endpoint and all key secondary endpoints at 12 months. So very promising phase 2 data with this weekly painless 20-minute stimulation targeting the default mode network. As we completed these phase 2 trials, we are now ready for pivotal trial. Our device prototype is ready. The FDA has agreed the design that will get us on the market with a 6-month endpoint. And we even have reimbursement codes just granted that will have Medicare pay for this therapy.
That's exciting, Ken. My name's James Cavuoto. I'm the editor and publisher at Neurotech Reports. We're here in San Francisco. We're a publishing and market intelligence firm in the neurotechnology space and also in bioelectronic medicine. Our 2 monthly industry publications are the Neurotech Business Report, now in its 25th year, and our newer publication is called Bioelectrics Business Report, covering the new field of bioelectronic medicine. We also produce conferences. Our next conference will be in New York City on April 14th, the Bioelectronic Medicine Forum. Would love to see you all there. It's at the New York Academy of Medicine. We also have a European conference, and we have a fall conference here in San Francisco called the Neurotech Leaders Forum. My colleague Jeremy Koff is here in the room and heads up our consulting operations at Neurotech Reports. And many of you know Jojo Platt, who is one of our senior contributing editors, who I believe is also here. So look forward to joining the panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christos Papadimitriou. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tessara Therapeutics. My background is in tissue engineering, regenerative medicine, and also in the broader spectrum of biomedical engineering. Tessara Therapeutics started as a company developing an implantable therapy for Parkinson's disease. And then we further developed the technology for drug screening application as well, with significant focus in neurodegeneration. So our technology features the creation of lab-grown human neural microtissues, or as we simply call them, mini brains. that we're able to customize for specific indications, but also to develop them in a way that fits the study design to de-risk the development program of our clients. And we primarily focus in really trying to see how a customer's compound will respond to human relevant and clinical relevant biomarkers, de-risking their development path. And thank you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Hi, everyone. My name's Cassandra, and I lead science at Click Therapeutics. We develop medical-grade software, so specifically smartphone applications that are cleared by the FDA to treat disease. In 2025, we had a lot of clinical wins to celebrate. Our product Rejoin for the treatment of major depressive disorder, developed in collaboration with Otsuka, is on the market. We received FDA clearance for episodic migraine treatment. We also successfully met our primary endpoint in our Convoke phase 3 pivotal trial for the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. That product developed in collaboration with Boehringer Ingelheim. That's something a drug has never done. We're really excited about it. We also have been expanding outside of CNS. We had early stage positive pilot trial data with a smartphone-delivered neuromodulatory intervention for cancer-related pain, fatigue, and mood. So very excited about those clinical advancements this last year.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Cohen. I'm a research analyst at Ladenburg Thalmann. Thank you to Sachs for hosting us and hosting the conference. My interest over the past 20 years has been focused on energy delivery diagnostics predominantly, and also other ancillary medical technology that have been out there. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff, co-chairing the panel with me, and thank you all for these exciting and new technologies. And I think we're going to leave the floor for James to go through a couple of slides with a recap of what we have seen in 2025 in the space, and maybe also anticipate what the 2026 will look like from your point of view.
Thank you, Diana. So just a couple of slides. I want to talk about some of the key industry events from 2025. We do this on an annual basis in our publication, Neurotech Business Report. So this is actually a recent editorial from Neurotech Business Report, and if you scan the code, it's freely available on our website, but it's just kind of our analysis of key events from 2025 in the neurotechnology business. Not all good news. On the bad news side, a lot of government funding cutbacks, particularly at the NIH, at the National Science Foundation, and other organizations that provide non-dilutive funding to startups in the neurotech space. A little bit sad. We obviously hope that this is temporary. We hope that that funding will continue. There's still programs that are out there. There's still some good opportunities, but by and large, most of the investment in 2025 was coming from private sources, and a lot of it in the BCI space. So I call it a feeding frenzy. In fact, it's quite a bit of funding. There are valuations of at least a couple of companies that are over $1 billion. Neuralink, of course, at $9 billion. And many other companies in the several hundred millions. And again, these are firms that forget about being profitable, don't even have products on the market yet. So it's an indication of how much investor interest there is in brain-computer interface technology. There's definitely potential. Is there sufficient potential revenue to support all of these firms? Well, that's another question. I think we're going to delve into that as a panel later on. Other events in the industry on the spinal cord stimulation side, which has primarily been the largest segment of the neurotech industry. A big deal was a medtech firm called Globus that bought one of the 4 largest SCS manufacturers, Nevro, in a deal valued at about $250 million. Now that deal disappointed a lot of people because previous deals in that space had been $1 billion or more. A lot of people had expected a bigger return. Nonetheless, it was an exit. It did bring in a player who's very active in the ortho space. So a lot of people see potential in the synergies between the medtech companies in spine and ortho and medtech companies in neuromodulation. In fact, one of the key events of last year was not a merger, but kind of an agreement between some of these clinical societies, NAS, the North American North American Spine Society, the North American Neuromodulation Society, as well as a couple of other clinical organizations decided, let's work together instead of fighting with each other. Let's put the needs of the patient first, regardless of what our particular intervention is, and try to speak with one voice. Another deal that happened during the year, Boston Scientific bought a company called Nalu. It was several $100 million, and indicative of the fact that maybe if the market has soured a little bit on spinal cord stimulation, there's certainly a lot of interest in peripheral nerve stimulation. So Nalu was primarily in the PNS, peripheral nerve stimulation side of things. Also mentioned that China has put up a number of new startups in the BCI space. They've made no secret of the fact that they would like to compete with the US in the BCI market, and they've certainly made some progress. Some of the trends we want to watch in this coming year, and again, we're going to delve into this as a panel later on, but we see there's going to be a convergence of what we now call the DBS industry and what we now call the BCI industry. Really what we're talking about are brain implants. And Elon Musk has made no secret of the fact that although his device is a brain computer interface for sensing intent of the user, he also believes that they will be stimulating as well. And of course, DBS companies like Medtronic have made no secret of the fact that they will be sensing in addition to providing stimulation to various brain targets. So no matter how you slice it, I think these are, one and the same. When you're talking about closed loop brain stimulation, whether you're talking about BCI that delivers stimulation, whatever you call it, to us, it's just a neuromodulation device or a neural implant. So terminology is going to be less important than function, what it does, and of course the data. How well does it work? Does it solve the problem? We'll expect to see continued interest from the tech industry, companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft, who will be making deals not only on the healthcare side, where they're looking to, bring their software and bring their human interface technology to aid individuals with paralysis, for instance, but also looking longer towards the consumer neurotech market. So I think we'll be talking a little about that as well as a panel. Along a similar line, pharmaceutical companies, I think, are going to continue to invest in neurotech. It's been a little bit slow, but we've been tracking this trend in our new publication, Bioelectrics Business Report, and we expect to see more activity from big pharma, either partnering with or acquiring or licensing technology from bioelectronic medicine firms. To date, the neurotech industry has been driven largely by electrical stimulation interventions, but we're seeing a number of new modalities like ultrasound, optical stimulation, magnetic stimulation, and combinations thereof. So we're going to, I think, continue to see a lot of the same principles involved in neuromodulation apply, whether the energy is magnetic, electrical, optical, vibrational, etc. I mentioned earlier, PNS, because of the ability to target different nerves, different locations, gives you the ability to target very specific applications. And we think that while SCS will still be a strong, significant part of the neuromodulation business, PNS for pain and for other indications, including bowel and bladder disorders, is going to displace at least some of that market that's been primarily or exclusively in the domain of the SCS players, Medtronic and Boston and Abbott for the most part. We also think there's still tremendous opportunity and unmet medical need in the psychiatric disorder market. And of course, what Ken and other companies have been able to demonstrate in Alzheimer's disease and related disorders is extremely promising. But we've also seen a lot of activity in treating major depression and addiction, which are, again, huge unmet needs. Finally, I mentioned the consumer neurotech space. We at Neurotech Reports will be launching a new publication called brainsconnected.com, watch for it, where we will be covering the consumer neurotech space. These are applications that don't require FDA approval and that are primarily targeted to the wellness market. So that's a new venture on our part. We'll be happy to tell you more about it. Thanks for your time, and happy to take more questions later.
Thank you very much, James. So an interesting year and more to come. Thank you for that. But we're going to start with a bit of a discussion after setting the scene with you. And we're going to start with BCI. You mentioned BCI being extremely well funded. And I mean, with the capital flowing in, and unclear about the indication, the priorities, they're going to get an indication, but there are other segments where there's the opposite in neurotech. There is quite scarcity of capital. So what's the driver? I mean, maybe Rotem, you want to take this question. What do you think is a driver for investors to allocate money into these segments?
I think we start with a big name on the room. Without Elon Musk, I don't think that BCI would have been what it is today. So we cannot avoid that. And I think it's an opportunity for BCI, but it's an opportunity for neurotech in general. When there is kind of a flashlight on a subject, first it means that it gets headlights. It means that it gets a lot of funding. But it means that people start to imagine things that are not necessarily the regular step of evolvement. So normally in a medtech, especially in a class 3 medical device, we're very conservative. We think about even half a step, not one step. We think about regulation. We think about what we cannot do. It's hard for us to imagine long horizon and to think about what we can do, what we want to do. So when I think about what figures like Elon Musk had brought to the table, I think that they brought more than just focus and money. I think that they brought opportunities. Because what we see is we get investments that are with different scale. We get valuation that are something that we are not familiar with, not just in the neurotech, I would say in medtech in general. Rightfully so, as James said, valuations are very high compared to the fact that we are in companies that do not generate anything. None of them has started pivotal trials. But what we see is that other opportunities comes with that money. We see companies like Microsoft. We see companies like NVIDIA. We see companies like Apple that today see the opportunity that maybe for us, it's hard to imagine. So I think we should look at it as a bundle of opportunities. It's money, it's understanding that what we do in the medtech has a pace, but there is different venues beside medtech. And people understand that today everything converges. James talked about the fact that we talk about BCI or we talk about DBS or neuromodulation, but we have to think about BCI as a communication system. And when you think about BCI as a communication system, all of a sudden, it's not just a medical device. maybe it starts invasive, but it would evolve to non-invasive eventually. So it's money and much more into BCI.
Thank you. So can we talk about closed loop systems a little bit and some of the biomarkers and that are involved as far as identification, and talk about if it's been successful so far or not? I think, Ken, if you could comment, followed by Chris.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, closed loop is really a direction that all of Neuromod is moving towards. And you can define closed loop in various ways. There's the big open loop of programming an SCS device and then reprogramming it months later. And then there's real-time adjustment in real time, like Saluda has for spinal cord stimulation, for example. But this is driving a lot of personalization and precision in a totally new way, because we can now do many things that we couldn't do before. Alzheimer's is a progressive degenerative disease. And so are other diseases like Parkinson's. In the case of Alzheimer's, the brain is always changing. Unfortunately, it's atrophying. Connectivity is changing. Excitability is changing. And so the ability to adjust both at baseline and over time, this is totally new. When we combine TMS with EEG, we can read where the evoked potentials travel in the brain. We can decode the brain. And so we can dial in a stimulation location that is unique for every individual that maximizes the engagement of their default mode network. Not only that, but we can also dial in a safe but effective dose, which actually varies by quite a bit patient to patient. But then it gets better. The prescription, if you will, changes over time. It can be recalibrated, in our case, every 3 months or so to make sure that we're still in the right spot, and more than likely, the dose will go up over time. So think of a drug that could do any of this. I'm not aware of any. The drug would have to go to the right spot, only that spot, at the right dose. The dose changes over time to adjust for changes in the biology underlying the disease. This is precision medicine at a connectome level. So aspects of closed loop like this are becoming much more mainstream, whether we look at NeuroPace with real-time sensing in epilepsy, or DBS in Parkinson's with local field potential adjustments. All these different trends are moving inexorably towards more and more precision, more and more personalization, and the ability to recalibrate and adjust over time. It's a really exciting time to be in Neuromod for that reason.
I absolutely agree. Excellent points. Of course, closed loop solutions is the future, and in some cases they provide the solutions that even implantable cell therapies couldn't do that, because they didn't have this feedback loop. It was more like injecting cells in the brain and let's hope for the best. So it's definitely a new application that is going to revolutionize the space. And where I'm very excited about this closed loop intervention is also in clinical trials as well. As you very correctly mentioned, having the ability to monitor in real time, or at least collect data over weeks of months and then see what is happening. It will allow us to have better monitoring of clinical trials, so they can be used as a companion diagnostic or in a similar capacity. And that will allow us, even potentially for non-invasive approaches in phase 1, to recalibrate what we know about this indication or the clinical trial design that we can then change. And of course, when we're talking about phase 2 and phase 3, we can definitely further de-risk the development of the clinical trials. It is something that I'm very excited about, and of course it opens a new opportunity for biomarkers that we can see. We have new biomarkers now developed even from clinical trials when we use AI, that they are specific to the indication, and of course AI, and of course biomarkers that they are specific to a specific population as well. So this type of neurotech technologies can also be used in a way for clinical trial stratification. So in my world, increasing the success rate of existing therapeutics as well, together with neurotech, is an amazing new opportunity, and I'm really looking forward for that.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, if you think that there's no other therapeutics that you can tailor real time, basically, you can, because when you have implantable that can work as sensor at the same time as stimulation, it's the optimization of precision medicine in a way that no other therapeutics can do. It's amazing. I think it's it brings us this idea that, I mean, we're very much focusing on this in a class of invasive technology, right? We talked about BCI, we talked about sensor and stimulation, but the market is kind of reacting quite differently. James, this is for you. You didn't mention this big pool, the separation there is between invasive and non-invasive devices that are having a quite different success in terms of clinical viability, scalability, and specifically reimbursement. What's so different? Can you explain us a bit how the market is so different for these two group of devices?
Yeah, and I touched on this briefly earlier. There's a raging debate, I won't say raging, but there's a lively debate within the BCI field as to what exactly is a BCI? What do we include and what's not included? Are EEG devices, BCIs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of this debate is really semantic as far as I'm concerned. What's really more important is what are you trying to accomplish, and are you actually accomplishing something? And that's why I say forget about whether you call it BCI or DBS, an implanted device that's using closed loop technology, looking for a signal, delivering stimulation. That's a neural implant. And whether you call it BCI or whether you call it DBS, it's a neural implant that's solving a problem, hopefully. On the other hand, if you have a wearable device, sure, it could be reading brain signals, and it could even be closed looped in that maybe you're pairing that EEG signal with TMS. Or maybe you're pairing that with transcranial DC or transcranial AC stimulation or pulsed ultrasound or something. But there, I think, is a different market. It's a different market because of the regulatory burden, for one. Also because of what the patient might and might not be willing to accept. Do they want to have brain surgery to have a device implanted? And also the intended application. So clearly we're interested in consumer applications. We think there's enormous potential there, and obviously we're not the only ones to think that. Those are going to be wearable devices. Not to say that you won't have FDA devices that are non-invasive. You certainly will. Ken's a good example here. Are they solving a problem? Are they addressing a medical need? Yes. So I think that should be the differentiation. I think we really don't want to get too bogged down into a debate over what is a BCI and what isn't a BCI. We should really be asking the question, what problem are we solving? What indication are we addressing? Or if it's a consumer application, what application are we addressing? And I think the market's going to be more determined by that. So for instance, if it's a medical device, are you going after psychiatrists? Are you going after neurologists? Are you going after rehabilitation doctors? Are you going after pain doctors? Those existing relationships, for instance, Medtronic and Abbott and Boston Scientific, have a core of a sales force that has been calling on those clinicians, whether they're neurosurgeons, whether they're PM&R. And I think that's what gives them a leg up as the BCI and DBS worlds converge. Whereas if you look at even Neuralink, the largest funded of the companies, and other firms that are newer to the market who have demonstrated amazing things in their trials, but they don't have a sales force. They don't have the people who've been calling on the doctors who are going to be implanting those, let alone, all of the insurance issues. So that's why we're convinced that BCI and DBS really belong together, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if we see some M&A activity, if not in 2026, maybe in 2027, where Medtronic or Abbott or Boston or all three make an acquisition of one or more of these, maybe one of the firms here on this panel. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. And I want to ask Jeff also to comment on the public markets. How the public markets see those two groups, implantable versus non-invasive? I mean, they react completely differently. That's what I...
And maybe this is also a question for James. So when we think about in the public markets, we think about valuations. We typically look at a revenue multiple, and going out a number of years, we may look at an EBITDA multiple or cash flow generation. But I guess I wanted to go back to you, James, when you talk about a B2B business versus an OTC business, when you have a vagal nerve stimulation device or something as such that's being sold for cash on the internet without having to go through reimbursement and having to go through the whole payer activity, is it more valuable? Is it less valuable? And when you talk about breaking that out within evasive, non-invasive, would you also break that out for payers versus non-payers?
Great question, Jeff, and something we have, really a debate that we've been following in our publication for the last few years. There are a number of firms, Spark Biomedical in Dallas is one example, of a firm that's using non-invasive technology. In their case, it's transauricular vagus nerve stimulation. Originally for a medical issue, addiction, had great success with it. Again, I think that's a super valuable application, unmet medical need. However, they've discovered other indications, not least of which are femtech applications and menstrual pain. And there they've decided to go the non-FDA route. By not making a medical claim, you can avoid, I don't know if avoid is the best word, but you don't need to necessarily go through the FDA process. In fact, FDA has a form, it's called 513G. It's a letter that you can get from the FDA that says, well, you're not making a medical claim, so you don't really need to go get a clearance or an FDA approval for this. So there's a subset of the healthcare market called DTC. Pharmaceutical people, will know it as over the counter. But direct to consumer means, yeah, you're approved, but you don't have to, have a prescription. You can go get it from Walmart or you can go get it from Best Buy. And then a number of firms have tried this, and several are, continuing to do this. Obviously, it's self-pay. They don't have to deal with reimbursement unless, of course, it's coming from their employer. And a lot of employers will reimburse for over-the-counter or direct-to-consumer things like this. So there's really three categories, right? There's the large expenditure where you have to have insurance reimbursement, or you're just not going to be able to, it's not going to be a viable business. Most implanted neuromodulation procedures fall in that category. And then you have this middle ground where it is a medical device, it is a medical application, but the price point might be low enough that some of the patients can self-pay or get support from their employer. And then, of course, on the lowest end of the pyramid, you've got the consumer applications. And these are, obviously, you're not going to get reimbursement because they're self-pay. You buy at Best Buy or you buy through Amazon. So that's kind of the three tiers of reimbursement that we see.
Thank you, James. And Cassandra, you mentioned AI, another game changer for the industry. So you mentioned the use of AI in the solution that you are developing and in Neurotech more in general. Can you elaborate on that? Can you explain what you guys are doing and what's the impact?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, related to the conversation earlier on closed loop solutions, certainly AI has an application in the algorithms that personalize those closed loop solutions and deliver and the therapy on the fly in a way that's right for that patient at that time. Another way that we're using AI is taking an agentic approach to developing our therapeutics. So that means we're using all of our clinically validated interventions, our data, and we're leveraging that to develop therapeutics quicker that have a stronger basis of clinical validation than if we weren't using that Gen AI and agentic approach. I think there's also a lot of opportunity for AI, similar to drug discovery, to identifying new brain targets, refined ones, and also what digital neurotech interventions can target those.
Thank you, Rotem. Do you also use AI in the solutions you develop?
Yes, I think that the entire industry that takes signals out needs to think what to do with that. So today we call it AI, LLMs, doesn't matter. The reality is that when you see an immense amount of data and you want to get sense of it, whether it's what you intend to do because you want to decode a specific closed loop application, whether you understand that you have an immense of data and you can come up with new things, let it be biomarkers or understand things. The minute that we stop thinking about medical devices just as very functional and very local, and we understand that what we do in medical devices, we sense, we have information. When we have information and we have, as things progress, and we have better technologies, we have better capacity to transmit information out, we have better capacity to store information, to process information. All of a sudden, every medical device needs to tackle all that immense of data. And what we used to call a medical device has most medical devices that tend to work with data today have to think about AI. So that's in general, and specifically in BCI, unlike what we've seen up until today, it's not only the fact that we are working with data, is how much data we would have and what's going to be the amount of data updates that we would have. So if before we used to have BCI that was connected for several hours, few times a week, all of a sudden we see 24 hours recording. What does it mean when we have 24 hours of recording? We see awake, we see sleep, we see drugs going to the system, we see the effect of it. So I think in other ways, when we see more, it means that we have other opportunity to think about what can we get from the data. So we could utilize it to exactly what was the indication after. And many companies understand that they have other opportunity to pursue. So it means that we need to have better ways to manage data. It requires better skills, and that brings, again, additional options into the field.
I know for a few years now we've had this debate about drugs versus energy, neurotech versus drugs. Are they complementary or not? And are the pharma companies coming around to better understand what's going on with some of the energy deliveries? I guess it's a fairly open-ended question, but maybe I'll start with Cassandra next to me and Christos.
Yeah, I really think that these approaches are complementary. That's certainly how we approach it at Click. Our therapeutics are developed as adjunctive to drugs, and in our phase 3 trials have demonstrated clinical effectiveness on top of the effective drug alone. And so I think that's really important when we think about prescribing behavior, and why we go the prescription route in part is because these need to be part of prescribing practices just as drugs are, and that complementary effect, I think, needs to be acknowledged in how we develop the therapeutics. Is pharma coming around? I think from our perspective, we have our longstanding collaborations with Otsuka and BI. I think right now there's such a surge in digital health, in neurotech. It's not whether pharma will come around. It's, I think, pharma deciding when and how this fits into their long-term portfolio strategy?
That's an excellent question about how they can be used together with therapeutics, and I agree with you when it comes to that they have a complementary nature. The therapeutics together with the neurotech. From what I see, judging how the both technologies work, it's not a new thing. We've seen the delivery of energy, as you mentioned, Jeff, in the deep brain stimulation, how effective it can be for a variety of patients and in many other indications as well. But as we know, therapeutics, yes, they do work by modulating a switch. They either turn it on or off. And the same thing can be done with the delivery of energy. However, we cannot forget that the therapeutics, sometimes they act upstream or downstream a specific pathway. And of course, mental disorders and neuroscience in general is complicated. So this is where I see some of the limitations of neurotech technologies, that they cannot have the spectrum of applications as therapeutics, that with one compound you can target a variety of indications or diseases, or a pathway that can be disease modifying in some cases. So this is the limitations that I see with the neurotech, and where they can be used as a complementary technology, but not as let's say the first line of treatment in several indications when it comes to the brain.
I really want to hear the answer from Ken, because that might be a different one. And when you're treating patients, Alzheimer's patient, you get some data that's excellent and even better on an overlapping population with those of the approved drug. So are you going in direct competition or not?
You knew I was dying to answer that question, Diana. Well, I mean, it's really interesting, and you look at areas in neuromodulation, you often see that neuromod comes in and complements drugs. Okay, so we see that a little bit with epilepsy, we see that with migraine, you know migraine better than I do. Overactive bladder, there's a complementarity sometimes. You do see some substitution. Another way to think about it, though, is that neuromodulation works at a systems level. We have to start thinking about systems biology. In biotech, and I'm a biotech guy, we're so focused sometimes on a molecular mechanism that is just one piece of the puzzle. You know, you have a receptor, an agonist, and an effect. If you stimulate a complex, large system in the CNS, you're going to get lots of different effects, many different downstream, second order, and third order effects. We just published an MOA review paper in a top journal that goes into exquisite detail on how TMS stimulation, excitatory TMS stimulation, when delivered to the default mode network, results in structural and functional changes to the network, thereby stabilizing the network, reducing neuroinflammation as well. We see evidence of that. And then get this, even reducing amyloid production as a third order effect. So think about that. When you stabilize a complex firing system like the human brain, there's so many different effects. So are we complementary to the drugs? Probably. But rather than focusing on amyloid or tau or other single molecular entities, we're focused on stabilizing the firing of a very complex system. What is the cause of heart disease? There is no cause. There's many causes. They all contribute. They all compound. They all have downstream effects. If you were to look at therapeutics for heart disease, you have to look at the whole thing. You have to look at the cellular, the electrophysiology, the mechanical, the metabolic. You have to look at all of these aspects the same way with Alzheimer's disease. So in the case of Alzheimer's, I believe that we are upstream of a lot of these downstream drugs, but we could also be complementary to them. And we've been approached by many pharma companies to say, hey, let's look at combination therapy. It makes all sense in the world. We had 87% slowing on one marker at 12 months, and that's pretty good. But not all of them rise to that level. 87% slowing in Alzheimer's is pretty good at 12 months, I would say. But we could do even better if we added a drug. So that's my long-winded answer of saying that eventually it's going to be combination potential.
Thanks. Wanted to go to beyond treating diseases as far as augmentative applications, enhancing memory, enhancing attention, physical capabilities, mental capabilities in generally healthy individuals. I guess question for Rotem, is it coming? Is it enhancing? Is it going to be mainstream anytime soon?
I think that's part of the last slide in many presentations in BCI. It's what's going to be coming next. I don't think we are there yet. Even though people would like, and it's good to dream ahead, when you go invasive, first you have to go with the most needy population. So you go the most acute chronic disease. We stabilize the system. We see whether it makes sense. And by then, I believe the appetite would grow. Today, there are a few that are giving that a chance, but it's mostly in clinical or it's mostly in research. Companies don't have yet the appetite to go there.
Cassandra, do you have an opinion on what acceptance from patients or healthy individual in that case could be with these technologies to enhance their capabilities? Is that something that you have seen in trials or?
I think a really important part of that is from day one involving the patient in the development process. And I know for all these different technologies that looks so different, the type of patient involvement. But I think at the very end of the day, it's important to develop something that people want to use. And the way you do that is by involving them frequently and early on. And I think when we do that, we are able to develop these solutions that when they're really truly solving a problem that patients can get behind, they're excited about, as long as we're delivering the information about the evidence in a way that's meeting people where they are in their health literacy and how they process that information.
Does anyone know where FDA stands with this technology to be offered to healthy individuals? Does anyone know if their FDA has an opinion, or it's what the regulatory path would be eventually?
Are you talking about implanted
I'm
devices?
talking about non-patient, that's enhancement of healthy individuals.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolving landscape. FDA has put out position papers or draft guidance with respect to, well, a lot of these are digital health applications or software as a medical device, kind of as guidance. Their charter of the FDA is for medical devices, which is to say, or medical interventions, which is to say things that treat if you make a medical claim, right? So if you don't make a medical claim, you're fine. However, if you want to implant a device in someone's brain, I don't think the FDA is going to allow that, as much as Elon Musk would love to see that happen. Now, look, I could be wrong. It could be that there's a coming realignment of regulatory in today's Washington. Who knows what could happen? But I personally don't foresee a time where the FDA is going to say, yeah, you can go ahead and implant electrodes in your brain, basically as intellectual Botox, to make you feel better. Now, again, I could be wrong. The day could come, and I won't rule out the possibility that there could be less invasive ways of doing implants. Companies like Subsense, who are using magnetic nanoparticles. Hey, maybe you breathe something in or you inhale it in your nose, and now all of a sudden you've got a kind of a brain implant that can be modulated with magnetic stimulation. We're getting closer to that boundary area, but for the moment I would say, probably not.
Thanks. So I know we're running out of time. We're just going to go down the line, 30 seconds each. What's most exciting that you've seen? What's most exciting that gets you out of bed in the morning? If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Well, many things. I think that for me, the most exciting thing is seeing things that are converging. What we used to think about one field became 2 fields, became 3 fields, became 4 fields together. So I heard many things about the future. Personally, I think that it's closer than what we think. I don't think that it's going to be maybe implantable full devices in, but as things tend to converge, I believe that we would see different ways of converging many things, doing many additional things. Once we understand the brain more, we would be doing more as a field. So, convergence.
And I would be focusing on other neurodegenerative diseases, but non-invasively. I mean, that's my passion, is with all respect to BCIs, and I love DBS, if we can accomplish things without cracking the skull, that's my preference. Others can, maybe think about it differently, but if there are ways to enhance human cognition, that would be exciting to me. We're focused on Alzheimer's, so we're more focused on stabilizing. Stroke, there's just nothing for these patients. If we can rewire by inducing plasticity around the ischemic region, that is a game changer potentially in the future. TBI as well. All of which I think argues for, maybe non-invasive approaches at first. And if those fail, then maybe deep brain stimulation could follow, or focused ultrasound. But there's so much application still unpursued in this area. There's a list of 10 indications I could think of, but those are the top ones to me.
And you've already heard from my slide presentation what I thought were areas in the healthcare space of unmet medical needs. But since you asked the question that way, what would I be working on? It's consumer. And so that's why we've decided to launch a new site called brainsconnected.com for wellness and consumer applications. And if it could make my tennis serve a little bit better, hey, I'm all for it.
I believe we're closer than ever to find curative treatments for many neurological diseases. And again, borrowing the concept of convergence by using more human-relevant technologies together with AI, together with implantable or non-implantable neurotech devices to monitor clinical trials and other therapies. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to have therapies for neurological diseases that we never imagined. So this is what makes me very excited.
I'm really interested in ways that we can seamlessly integrate this technology into people's lives. So things like electrical fabric, just ways that you can use technology for health that you don't even realize or think about on a daily basis. If I wasn't doing this, I think I would be doing another neuromod endeavor, which is psychedelics.
I can't be a stand-up comic, so I'm going to go with full-body imaging and diagnostics so that you could recognize all the signaling throughout the body and fix it properly, particularly between the ears.
Wow. Okay. And with that, I think we're going to close because we are 3 minutes late. And so I'm going to thank all the panelists. Thank you for the exciting discussion, and thank you for the audience for staying with us until the end.